Revelation can be a dark book, and chapter 17 might be its darkest chapter. John has a vision of a woman riding a beast, and this is meant to communicate to us about the evil religion of the Antichrist. The reason I want to talk about this chapter is that last time, when we were in the book of Zechariah, we studied how God still yet has a plan for Babylon in the end times. Now, what is that plan? Revelation shows us that it will be the capital of his last days' dark empire. I probably bit off more than I could chew with this episode. This is a tough chapter. In fact, I'd say it's probably the hardest chapter to understand in all of Revelation, which means we're just going to take things nice and slow. We're going to look at one piece at a time and then try to put them all together the best that we can here on the God and His Prophets podcast. Welcome to God and His Prophets. This is a verse-by-verse study through the Bible's major and minor prophets. My name is Luke Taylor, and we are looking at Revelation 17 today. We're going to try to discover the future of Babylon. And we have been going through a Zechariah series, and so if you remember from the last episode, what I said when we finished that one up was that I wanted to just take a week and step into the book of Revelation and see how some of these things we talked about from Zechariah chapter 5, how they tie in with John's vision of the end of the world that's depicted in the book of Revelation. So we're still in a prophetic book. It's just now we're jumping into a little bit more of a New Testament focus today. And I know it is not my normal day to be releasing an episode. I tell you what, I've been putting this one off a few weeks. I hated to put it off any longer. Here's a few reasons why it's been so long getting around to this episode. One, my other podcast, Weird Stuff in the Bible, I've been doing some really in-depth studies, did a couple episodes talking about the blood of Jesus and why blood was not allowed to be consumed in some of the Old Testament laws and the New Testament commands. And so as I was working on that, that got really intense, wore out my brain. It was a lot of new information for me. And then I did a couple weeks talking about Mount Hermon, and that's been a really intense study. So anyway, I just been stretched kind of thin with my scholarship, I guess you could say, and it's been hard to get back around to continuing this journey we've been going on through Zechariah. So I'm sorry it's been a few weeks. I was ready to go Sunday, and then some stuff came up. I had to push it off, so I thought, well, I don't want to wait till the next weekend. It's already been several weeks. I was going to try it last night, and then something else sprung up on me again. So here I am. I don't usually do these on a Tuesday night, but I just have to, I'm doing it because on this one, I'm just having to jump in here and do it when I can. That's kind of how things are in life right now. I'm doing it tonight because I have time. I don't want to wait till next weekend. So we'll go ahead and get into it here. So as you see from the episode title, what I'm talking about today is the religion of the Antichrist. And I put in there, is it Catholicism? Is it Islam? Is it something else? And I've been asked before in my previous studies, why am I so down on Catholicism? And I would say, frankly, right now in 2026, I have softened quite a bit in my criticisms of Catholicism from some of my earlier years. But I do have some major problems with Catholicism. And so I've really wrestled over the past few weeks of how hard should I come down on it? How hard do I even want to come down on it? I have Catholic friends who are they're really good people. They seem really devout. They seem to really love God. And I don't dislike Catholic people. Honestly, I don't. My issues are really with the Catholic Church and the church as an institution and some of the doctrines that it promotes, the most obvious of which would be praying to Mary. We'll talk about that today. But am I saying that a Catholic person can't go to heaven? No, I am not going to say that. I do believe there are going to be people in heaven right alongside me who got saved through the Catholic Church. And I even recognize, for a big chunk of church history, 1,000 years of church history, the Catholic Church was the church. Okay? 1,000 years ago, if you weren't getting saved through the Catholic Church, you probably weren't getting saved because that's just pretty much all there was. Okay? But I do still have major issues about a number of practices within the Catholic Church. Things like praying to saints, things like the rituals and a lot of the repetitive prayers that they emphasize, things that are not often found in Scripture, like the rosary, like following a pope, like how they call their spiritual leaders priests, which I think priest is an Old Testament concept. And so if someone was going to ask me, why do you have such a big problem with Catholicism? I would point them to a couple of things. One, early on in my years as a youth pastor, I'm not a youth pastor anymore, but I did a series of lessons with my Sunday school class where we looked at what's wrong with various religious groups, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Muslims. When I say what was wrong with them, like why those particular groups are apostate religions or not legitimate ways to heaven. And so I also did a week where I talked about Catholicism. And as I was studying all these different groups, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, Muslims, I was filled with this intense sympathy. Like my heart longed for them to just be reached with the gospel. And then I spent a week on Catholicism. And I'm not saying Catholics can't go to heaven. But as I studied this one, I was more filled with just anger because I was like, they have the word of God right in front of them. But then they'll go and do the exact opposite. You know, Jesus says, don't pray repetitive prayers. Don't call any man father. They call their priest father. Don't go chasing after wearing these flowing ornate robes. Don't disfigure your face when you're fasting. You know, Jesus says all these things. And then it just feels like, no offense to Catholics out there, but it feels like they just often try to do the exact opposite with the repetitive prayers, with the flowing robes. Right now we're in Lent. And I'm not saying it's wrong to do Lent fasting. I think it's 40 days up until Easter, Resurrection Sunday. People will do a period of fasting. And it starts with Catholics, throwing ashes on their forehead to let everyone know, hey, I'm fasting. When Jesus said, if you're going to do a fast, keep it between you and God. Don't go around telling everybody, okay? It says in the Bible, don't disfigure your faces. It seems like throwing ashes on your face to tell everyone you're fasting is like the exact opposite of what Jesus told us to do. And so anyway, I have some issues with that kind of stuff. I really do. And number two, reason why I have a lot of issues with Catholicism is Revelation chapter 17. As I read this chapter, I have always read this and pretty much assumed that it's talking about the Catholic Church in this chapter. And so we're going to get into that today. This chapter is about the religion that the Antichrist is going to impose on the world. And I'll assume you're pretty much familiar with a lot of practices in, prophecies. I assume you're familiar with the prophecies about the Antichrist, that he's going to say you need to take his mark, the mark of the beast. And if you don't take it in the end times, then, and this is during the 7-year tribulation, it's not something that would happen yet today, but he'll say, if you don't take his mark, then you can't buy or sell. And in fact, you'll get your head cut off. Like it's pretty brutal. The Antichrist does not believe in the First Amendment. Okay. You have to follow his state-imposed religion or he will literally be killing people. And so anyway, over the years, I've read a number of interpretations that see this as this religious system that Antichrist imposes, a lot of parallels that we'll talk about today with the history of Catholicism. I also read a lot of interpretations. I enjoyed trying to look at different views that see this as an Islamic prophecy. And I'm not so sure which one it is. I'm not saying it's 50-50. I'll tell you which way I lean after we go through all this today, but I've read books by people who see this as an Islamic Antichrist that's coming. And so as I'm going through this stuff today, I'm not trying to pick on Catholicism or Islam. I want us to read through the whole chapter of Revelation 17. We'll contrast two major views today. One looking at it through this is the Catholic lens, that this is like the Catholic Church is the institution that the Antichrist is using as his vehicle of religion. And then we'll look at it through more of an Islamic lens. And so hopefully you won't hear all this and think, oh, Luke's just angry at Catholics. I'm trying to be fair and just look at what the Bible says. So again, this is a tough chapter. It was so tough. It's taken me weeks to get this study done because I'm like, I don't know if I should have said I was doing this chapter this is a very complex prophecy. So to recap where we left off last time, we were looking at Babylon's origins, which goes all the way back to Genesis 11, the Tower of Babel in the land of Shinar. And then throughout the Old Testament, Babel becomes Babylon, and it becomes a world empire. We'll talk about what that means today. They become a world empire that eventually conquered Israel. And then later they were destroyed. The Babylonians were destroyed by the Persians. The Babylonian Empire fell, but it was not the end of Babylon because the city remained. The city has a future purpose. We see in Zechariah chapter 5, he has a vision of the woman in the basket, and that vision is showing us that there is a future plan for Babylon. And so we'll get into it here. We'll talk more about these world empires and all this stuff. Let me get the verses up on the screen. Revelation 17, I'm reading from the ESV today. I'll have words on the screen. If you're listening on podcast later, I'm going to have a lot of graphics and visuals today. So I encourage you to go check out the YouTube channel if you want to see some of these graphics, but I'll do my best to explain them as we go through them in case you just have to listen. Then one of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who is seated on many waters." Verse 2. And we're not going to focus on the 7 angels with the 7 bowls. That's pertaining to stuff that happened in the previous few chapters. Verse 2. "With whom the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality, and with the wine of whose sexual immorality the dwellers on the earth have become drunk." Okay, so John is going to receive this vision of a woman, a great prostitute, seated on many waters, and it says the kings of the earth have committed sexual immorality with her. It means they've bonded with her, they've joined themselves to her, and dwellers on the earth, which means unsaved people, have become drunk with her, okay, intoxicated with this woman. Now, what is this woman, okay? Well, this woman, she's also called the whore of Babylon, or sometimes called the woman who rides the beast, and her purpose in Revelation, she's contrasting with a couple things. You could contrast her with the bride of Christ, which is the church, which is supposed to be white, pure, virginal. You could contrast her with the woman of Revelation 12, who represents Israel who births the Messiah. And I believe this woman who rides the beast is literally the woman who is in the basket in Zechariah 5's vision, the one where an angel opened the lid of the basket and saw the woman in there and said, "This is wickedness," and pushed her back down in the basket and sent her off to be, saved for a later purpose. This woman is meant to represent Babylon and all of Babylon's evil. Like if the church is the bride of Christ, it's like this woman is the bride of Satan. And so much of the world has joined itself to this woman. That's what it means here when it describes it as sexual immorality, the idea of spiritual adultery, that it's joined themselves to this woman. This woman has influence, basically, in a lot of places of the world. Verse 3. "And he carried me away in the spirit into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman," verse 4, sorry. "The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality." So we see here there is this woman, and she's riding the beast. This is the same beast that we actually see in Revelation 13. The beast is the Antichrist and his empire. And so I think I talked about this on the last episode. It's been a few weeks, so I can't remember. But the 7 heads, it's referring to various world empires, past world empires, who are now a part of this end times empire. I think of it kind of like the Avengers, okay? In the past, we had all these like individual world empires. I'll just list them for you here. There was Egypt was the first one. And it's interesting, all these world empires persecuted Israel to some degree. Egypt, of course, enslaving the Israelites. Assyria. The third was Babylon. The fourth was the Medo-Persian Empire. The fifth one was Greece. And then the sixth one was Rome. And Now the seventh one is this end times world empire. So there's a beast with 7 heads. Now it's kind of like the Avengers team up, okay, of all the previous world empires. And it's like they all come back in some form, all together as one team to try to prevent the second coming of Christ. That's what they're doing. And so that's why there's this beast with all these heads, and it said it had 10 horns. We'll read some about this later. Daniel 7 and 8. The Antichrist empire initially has 10 leaders. He kills 3 of them. And then the woman who it talks about is this evil religious system of Babylon. She is riding the beast. She's using the Antichrist's empire as her vehicle to spread her religion. And so it said that she's wearing gold, purple, and scarlet. Okay. What's the significance of that? Well, as you read the book of like Exodus, Leviticus, where it's talking about how they created the temple, or the tabernacle, I guess at that time, but they created the tabernacle and the priestly vestments and all the things they had to set up for their sacrificial system in the Mosaic law. And you see gold and purple, blue, and scarlet. Gold and purple, blue, and scarlet. You just see these colors mentioned again and again and again. Everything is gold and purple and blue and scarlet. Right here, this whore of Babylon, she's wearing purple, scarlet, and gold, but there's no blue. So why is the blue missing? This is a little mysterious. I've heard it said that the blue represents grace. And the religion of the whore of Babylon has no grace. It's a religion of works. And I've always liked that explanation. I can't prove that blue means grace. If you can, please send it to me. Okay. GodAndHisProphetsPodcast at gmail.com. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail at that email today, but that's okay. You can send that to me. If you know why blue means grace, I would really like to know. But I think that explanation makes sense because all the false religions of the world, what is it that they are lacking? They are lacking grace. They are religions of works, that you have to do things to earn your way to heaven. And so that makes sense that her religion would be a religion with no grace. Let's go on to verse 5, Revelation 17:5. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations. So now the big question, who is Babylon the Great? Is this talking about America? I read a book a few years ago, very convinced that Babylon, the mystery Babylon here at the end of Revelation, is talking about America. I don't believe it's America. It's an interesting theory. Like I said, I read a whole book on it, but I was not convinced. Is Babylon Rome? Is Babylon Babylon? Everyone likes to say, oh, it can't be Babylon. It must be a code for something. It must be, because Revelation is all codes, right? Everything in prophecy, it's always metaphorical or symbolic. And so it's got to be anything but Babylon. Well, I think that would oversimplify things to say that prophecy is always symbolic. Okay, let's think about this. When Isaiah prophesied about the Messiah, he said the Messiah would be born of a virgin. And guess what? He was, literally. The Messiah was born of a virgin. Isaiah also said that his name would be Emmanuel. But then the angel comes to Mary and says, I want you to name him Jesus. Okay, so is that a contradiction? Was Isaiah's prophecy wrong? Well, Emmanuel was a code word. The meaning of Emmanuel is God with us, right? And so that is what Jesus was. Jesus was God with us. And so when Isaiah said the Messiah would be born of a virgin, that ended up being literally true. Okay, no matter how impossible it sounded, that was literally true. But then when Isaiah said the Messiah would be named Emmanuel, that was more of a symbolic prophecy. It was not literal. So it was a true prophecy, but it wasn't literally true. You know what I mean? So I think it's an oversimplification if we try to say prophecy is always symbolic or always metaphorical or that it's never literal. Okay, sometimes it's literal. Sometimes it's code. So when we look at Babylon, let me pull verse 5 up again. Is Babylon literally Babylon? Or is Babylon a code for something else? I'm willing to say, like, some of this stuff we're just not going to know until it all rolls out, until it happens, okay? And I'm not saying we can't know. I'm just saying, like, we're not going to have it all figured out. There's some parts of God's plan for the future that are just going to be mysterious to us. And I'm okay with that. Okay. I don't have to have it all figured out. I'm not, some people try to say, because the views I take of the future and end times, that I must think I have it all figured out. I certainly do not. I think I have a good framework for generally like how things are going to play out. But a lot of the details, we're just going to have to wait and see. The timing of Gog and Magog, I have an opinion on when I think that's going to happen. But we kind of just have to wait and see when it happens, because there's good arguments that place it at different times, okay? I did a whole 6-week series on Gog and Magog at the end of 2024 if you want to go look that up. So, there's going to be some mystery to how all these things play out specifically. And again, I'm fine with just saying we'll wait and see what happens. So, who is this woman supposed to be? I've got a commentary here. I think this is the best commentary on the book of Revelation. It's by John Walvoord, and he's passed away many years ago, but they have a kind of a more modern, updated printing of this. And I think the best answer, really, in my opinion, is what it says here on page, 257. He says, of primary importance in the study of Babylon is its relation to religion as unfolded in Revelation 17. In addition to information in the Bible itself, ancient accounts indicate that the wife of Nimrod, who founded the city of Babylon, became the head of the so-called Babylonian mysteries that consisted of secret religious rites developed as part of idol worship. She was known by the name of Semiramis and was a high priestess of the idol worship. According to extra-biblical records, Semiramis gave birth to a son, who she claimed was conceived miraculously. This son, named Tammuz, was considered a savior of his people and was in effect a false Messiah, purported to be the fulfillment of the promise given to Eve. The legend of the mother and child was incorporated into the religious rites and is repeated in various pagan religions. Idols depicting the mother as the queen of heaven with the baby in her arms are found throughout the ancient world, and countless religious rites were introduced promising supposed cleansing from sin. So, again, this is from John Walvoord's commentary on Revelation, which I highly recommend. I believe that this cult of Semiramis and Tammuz, like this was basically what morphed into the worship of Mary and deification of Mary that we see represented a lot in the Catholic Church. And I believe that's why in Zechariah 5, when we see the wickedness of Babylon, who's placed in this basket, the wickedness is depicted as a woman. It's not meant to be Mary. It's meant to be Semiramis, who wants to be worshipped as the queen of heaven. And within the Catholic Church, Mary is sometimes called the queen of heaven. There is a decree given. You can Google it, but a pope once made the declaration, Mary is the queen of heaven. That is a title that was given to Semiramis of Babylon, who I don't even know if Semiramis ever actually existed. I think she's a demonic deity, if anything. Not a false god that might be a demon who calls herself Semiramis or Ishtar or something like that. But I don't know if it's an actual person who ever existed on earth. But anyway, there's all this religious worship that goes to her as the quote-unquote queen of heaven. We see this come up in Jeremiah chapter 7, Jeremiah chapter 44. The people reject God because they want to worship the queen of heaven after they were conquered by the Babylonians. And so this title goes all the way back to Babylon. We see it again coming up in the Catholic Church in their deification of Mary, which I think that this praying to Mary stuff, it's just a really, really bad thing. I think that's why the wickedness of Zechariah is personified as a woman here in the visions of Zechariah and of John. And so throughout the rest of this chapter, as we go into verse 6 and on, I want to contrast the two views. Is this false religion that the Antichrist is going to use to rule the world? Is this Catholic in nature, or is this Islamic in nature? And if you're watching on video, I have an image here, and I think this is Mary and Jesus, a statue of Mary and Jesus. But again, it's this iconography that goes back to ancient times in Babylon of the Queen of Heaven, a woman and her child, Tammuz in Babylon. And we also see in Ezekiel chapter 8, I think, women weeping for Tammuz. It's idolatry going on in God's temple. And so all this stuff, it just has origins, very clear, easy to research origins in Babylon. But on the Islamic side of things, the symbol of Semiramis was a crescent moon. You can see this in statues of Semiramis going back to ancient times. Her symbol is a crescent moon. Okay, so what is the religion has its symbol of a crescent moon today? That's Islam. So again, you could also take this stuff about the Whore of Babylon, and you could pretty easily apply it to Islam as well. Okay, there's really it's open to debate, all right? So we're going to go through that debate as we continue on through here. It could be a mixture in the two. I want to say that too. Because after the rapture happens and all true believers are out of the world, all bets are off. Okay? All the religions of the world might just unite under the Antichrist. Like they might just all morph into some big blob of false religion. And, I think that according to Daniel 9, the two most likely candidates for the Antichrist, it's that he would either have to be a European with a Roman background, or it could be an Islamic Antichrist. And so again, time will just have to tell, because I think Daniel 2 only leaves those two possibilities open. Daniel 9 only leaves those two possibilities open to us. But I think whether he's an Islamic Antichrist or a European Antichrist, that will entail whatever religion he's going to impose on the world. So as we read the rest of these verses, let's look at different ways that this could be looked at. Verse 6, "And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. When I saw her, I marveled greatly." So we see that this woman and her religious system has been responsible for the deaths of many saints. Chuck Missler, and he's a Bible teacher I respect a lot, he has claimed that one Catholic pope killed more Christians in one afternoon than all of the Roman emperors combined. That is quite a claim. So I looked it up, and I believe it's a bit of an exaggeration, but only in the length of time, okay? There are popes who have killed more Christians than all the Roman emperors combined. In fact, the Romans are estimated, I was a little shocked at how low this was, but the Romans are estimated to have only killed about 10,000 Christians altogether during the time of the ancient Roman Empire. The worst pope of all was Diocletian, who was estimated to have killed 3,000 to 3,500 on his own. But altogether, you hear all these stories of the Christians who were fed to lions and so forth, and that stuff really happened, but it was less than 10,000 in those times. However, there are single popes who have killed thousands more Christians than that across their careers. Maybe not in a single afternoon, like Chuck Missler said, but across their lifetime, there are popes who killed more Christians than all the Roman emperors combined. There was King Charles IX, and he was not a pope, but he killed, it's a little bit, the numbers are, it's hard to know because they weren't always keeping records of all this stuff back then like we would today. But King Charles IX is believed to have killed between 5,000 and 30,000 Christians in the 1500s. And Pope Gregory XIII gave him a medal for it. Now, as I'm saying all this stuff, this is not me blaming all Catholics for this, okay? Especially not Catholics today. We could look at Protestant kings and Protestant leaders from history who have been monsters and committed atrocities and done terrible things, okay? We could call them monsters and that'd be fine. I am not saying all Catholics are guilty of this, what I'm talking about. The Catholics who are alive today seem perfectly peaceful, all right? I'm kind of looking at history, just history in general. There's a lot of people who did a lot of bad atrocities in general, but I'm trying to see who could this prophecy in Revelation 17:6 be about. So the Center for the Study of Global Christianity at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, they estimate that throughout church history, 70 million Christians have been martyred. 5.2 million of these deaths have been attributed to Catholics. 9.1 million of these deaths have been attributed to Islam. So Islam way more than Catholics, all right? Again, what does 17:6 tell us? I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. So this woman, whoever her and her religious system is, they have a history of slaughtering a lot of Christians. By the way, for some additional context, because if you're like, well, wait, 9 million from the Muslims, 5 million from the Catholics, what are all the rest of these? Atheism is responsible for the targeted killing of more Christians than anything else. Atheistic communism slaughtered more people in the last 100 years, okay, than the number of Christians who've been killed by Islam in all of church history. So I don't think the woman in Revelation 17 is an atheistic government, because the Antichrist is not an atheistic. he's demanding to be worshipped. So I don't think atheism is the religion of the Antichrist. But atheistic communism is responsible for the deaths of more Christians than any other false religion out there. I thought that was kind of interesting. So anyway, more information needed, trying to narrow down who this could be right here. Verse 7, but the angel said to me, why do you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns that carries her. Verse 8, the beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to rise from the bottomless pit and go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. Okay, this language, this is really complicated, guys. We're going to figure out, what does it mean that it was and is not and it is to come? Okay, here's a condensed version of this. The beast was and is not and is about to rise. This is talking about the empire of the Antichrist, okay? It was and it is not. That means this is an empire that existed and then it disappeared, and now it is coming back. So that seems to match with Rome. Rome was the final kingdom of these world empires that we saw a series of back in ancient times, and then Rome kind of faltered away. But the book of Daniel in chapter 2 and in chapter 7, Daniel prophesies that Rome is going to make a comeback. He has a vision in Daniel chapter 7 of this terrifying beast. And he prophesied that it would rise, fall, and then rise again in a little bit different way. We also see it in Daniel chapter 2. There's the vision of the statue, and all the parts of the statue represent different world kingdoms in history. For Daniel, they were future, but for us now they are history. And you get down to the legs of iron on this statue, and this was meant to represent the Roman Empire. And then you get down to the feet of the statue, and we have a new empire that's partly iron and partly clay. So it's partly Roman, but it's mixed in with other things. And that is the kingdom of the Antichrist. It's a revived Roman Empire. That's why there's the iron in there. But again, it's mixed with different things. We read about it in Daniel 2. I'll read a few verses here, verses 41 through 43. And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. And as you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. See how much we see the word mix right there. Well, as I said, this final end times kingdom of the Antichrist, it's going to be like the Avengers getting together, okay? All these different groups, they all had their own individual time to shine, and now they're all teaming up to try, again, these are bad guys though, they're teaming up to fight, to try to stop Jesus from coming back. And so that is what the Antichrist kingdom is made up of. So now let's go back to Revelation 17. This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen, 1 is, and the other has not yet come. And when he does come, he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. There you go, guys, clear as day, right? That's why I say this is a tough chapter. Like this is a rough one to get through, okay? It was and it is not. It was here and now it isn't. What's all this talking about? All right. So I'm going to throw up a chart on the screen, and it's going to show you kind of a chart of what this is talking about here. world empires, this phrase I keep using, world empires, because we can kind of see this mapped out. All right. So the first one is Egypt. The second one is Assyria. The third one is Babylon. The fourth one is Persia. The fifth one is Greece. The sixth one is Rome. And then what it told us is that 5 of these have fallen. One is, and what did it say in verse 10? 5 have fallen, one is, and the other has not yet come. Okay? Well, at the time that John is writing this, 5 have fallen. That's talking about the first 5: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. They all had they had their time. Okay, so they've fallen. One is means present tense. Okay, it means current. At the time that John is writing Revelation, the Roman Empire is in control. So that's the one that's current. That's current events for John. Okay, that's the one that is. Then this is where it gets extra complex, because it says the other has not yet come. Well, we'd think, okay, well, that's the kingdom of the Antichrist. That's the one that's coming. But then he talks about an 8th kingdom. Verse 11, it said, as for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction. So this is where I'm just laughing, because it's like, okay, I was never great at algebra. This has just like gone way over my head. I had in my mind wrapped around 7 kingdoms, sure. But now we're throwing in an 8th one. What's all that about? Okay. And it doesn't come after the Antichrist. It's an empire of the Antichrist. Here's what I believe it's talking about. The 7th kingdom is the kingdom of the Antichrist for the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. The 8th kingdom is the kingdom of the Antichrist for the second half of the 7-year tribulation. All right? And this is probably the only chapter in the Bible that actually breaks the Antichrist kingdom up into 2 different parts. But I'm pretty certain that this is what it's talking about, that there is a way the kingdom of the Antichrist is going to operate in the first half of the 7-year tribulation. And then right at the midpoint of the tribulation, 3.5 years in, there's this major turning point. A lot of things happen right at the middle of it. And then the second half of the tribulation is where things get even more intense. This is when the mark of the beast is rolled out. This is when you must worship the Antichrist or he's going to cut off your head. So that is the 8th kingdom that is being talked about here in this lineup of all the world empires of history. Okay? 5 have fallen. 1 is. Really, the other 2 are yet to come. They both represent the 2 halves of the tribulation and the government of the Antichrist in the tribulation. So what is the 7th one then? Well, the 7th one is the revived Roman Empire. It has 10 governors, and the Antichrist rises from their midst. He kills 3 of them, and the remaining 7 swear their allegiance to him. And we see this talked about. If you've been studying Bible prophecy for a while, you probably studied this before. Revelation 7, 19 and 20. Then I desired to know the truth about the 4th beast. He was having a vision here. Don't focus on the 4. Daniel is having a vision of the Roman Empire, which was going to rise and come back, fall and come back later, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up, and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions. Daniel was seeing this revived Roman Empire. He said it was a beast that had 10 horns. And there was this little horn who grew up in the midst of them, and 3 of the horns fell. The horns are leaders, kings, governors is what I call them. Those who are allowed to govern, but an Antichrist rises from their midst and takes control of the whole thing. It says 3 of them are going to die, but the other 7 will follow the Antichrist. That is the government of the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. It's this revived Roman Empire, okay? Earth has been set up with, again, like 10, maybe they're technocrats, maybe they're political leaders, but 10 guys who rule the world under the Antichrist. And that's how things roll for the first 3.5 years. And the religion that the Antichrist imposes during that time is going to be the religion of the whore of Babylon. So is it Islamic? Is it Roman Catholic? On one hand, she's the whore of Babylon. Babylon is Shinar. That is Iraq today. So that makes it sound like it would be a Muslim thing. However, what did it say back in let me go back to Revelation 17:9. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated. Some translations will translate mountains as hills. Either way, it is extremely obvious what it's talking about right there. It's talking about Rome. Rome's, one of the slogans, or I guess, or catchphrases for Rome in those days was the city on 7 hills. You can just Google this. Google city on 7 hills. Oh, that was ancient Rome. Like that was just a name for Rome, the city that sat on 7 hills. And so when it said the woman sits on 7 hills, 7 mountains, it's obvious that's what it's talking about is Rome. That makes it then sound maybe it's more like a Roman Catholic type of religion that's going on here. So it's a little bit strange. How can the whore of Babylon be in Rome? All right, well, let me continue. I'm going to go back to my Revelation commentary here by John Walvoord. Here's something he said. Again, in this context of talking about Tammuz and Semiramis and this cult of the mother and her child, and the mother is the queen of heaven, the Babylonian cult eventually made its way to other cities, including Pergamum, the site of one of the 7 churches of Asia. The chief priests of the Babylonian cult wore crowns in the form of, let me say this again. I want you to get this. The chief priests of the Babylonian cult wore crowns in the form of the head of a fish in recognition of Dagon, the fish god, with its title, Keeper of the Bridge. That is, the bridge between man and Satan, imprinted on the crowns. The Roman equivalent of the title, Pontifex Maximus, was used by the Caesars and later Roman emperors, and was also adopted as the title for the Bishop of Rome. In the early centuries of the church in Rome, incredible confusion arose. Attempts were made to combine some features of the mystery religion of Babylon with the Christian faith, the results of which are still present in the Roman church today. In Revelation 17, the last stage of counterfeit religion is revealed, as it will be in existence in the period before Christ's return to earth. Okay, so the ancient Babylonian cult, and I'll show some pictures here for those of you who are watching, as they worshipped the quote-unquote queen of heaven, they had these priests who would wear suits that looked like fish heads, okay? And that's because they worshipped a fish god. And it was called Dagon in some places. It spread out. It was known by different names in different locations. But they would wear these fish garbs on their head, which is the exact same style that the Catholic Church later adopted for the hats that you see popes wear. And the term pope used to be Pontifex Maximus, the chief bridge builder. Again, it came from this Babylonian religious system where that was a title that they used for the leaders of their priesthood. Here's a picture of Nimrod that was found in an ancient Assyrian city. They had this picture of Nimrod, and you see him right here with one of these fish helmets on, one of these fish heads on his head. Very strange thing. But if you research the history of all these things, it is very clear that this all has Babylonian roots and that it migrated up into the Roman Empire. It really spread out all over the world. The Semiramis and Tammuz iconography, it came from Babel, but it endures today. The woman and child. Semiramis, the queen of heaven. All this stuff started with Nimrod and Babel, and it spread out throughout the world, and it really metastasized in Rome. And so that's why I believe why we see this woman riding the beast. She's Babylonian, and yet she's sitting on the 7 hills. It all makes so much sense. But again, to be fair, we also see parallels with Islam. If you look at the Islamic faith, they are looking for the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, who will rule the world, they believe, for 7 years. Well, that sounds like they're looking for the person who would be the Antichrist. The Muslims believe that his capital will be in Babylon, Iraq. Again, that lines up perfectly with biblical prophecy about the Antichrist. Daniel 11 says the Antichrist is going to honor a god of fortresses or a god of war. Sounds kind of like Allah that you see in Islam. But then it also says that the Antichrist will not honor the God of his fathers. So I don't know. I'm not sure what to do with that. Both Islam and Catholicism could both be described as apostate from biblical Christianity because both of them have roots. I mean, obviously, Catholicism, they use the same Bible that Protestant Christians do. So they change a lot of practices, as I've already went through, why I believe that they're an apostate form of Christianity. But Islam, they believe that they also came from Abraham. And they believe that they believe a lot of great things about Jesus. Like Muslims are really not anti-Jesus. They just don't believe he was the Son of God. And so anyway, both of these could be described as kind of an apostate form of true Christianity. The kingdom of the Antichrist could be an amalgamation of a bunch of different religious beliefs, just like it's all these world empires wrapped up into one big package. He could just try to get all the different religions of the world and just try to wrap them all up into one package too. So that could be a way that this all plays out. That's why I say could be Islam, could be Catholicism, could be something totally different. Okay? Could be all of it mashed up together. That's kind of how Revelation 13 describes the government of the Antichrist as he's coming up out of the sea. It says, I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's. Its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. So I talked about this last time. The leopard represents Greece. The bear represents Persia. The lion represents Babylon. So his kingdom is kind of a mashup of all these different countries. Maybe it's also a mashup of a bunch of different religions. Okay? I could see it playing out that way very, very easily. Let's try to wrap up Revelation 17 today. And the 10 horns that you saw, I'm starting at verse 12, are the 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour together with the beast. So this revived Roman Empire, okay, they are the first half of the tribulation. That is the kingdom of the Antichrist, and his religion is the religion of the prostitute seated on many waters. Verse 13. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. Verse 14. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful. Verse 15. And the angel said to me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute is seated are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. Okay? So the religion of the woman that is going to be in this first half of the tribulation, they represent many, that's what it means when it says the sea, many different peoples, Gentile nations, peoples of the world. Okay? Are these multitudes and languages and peoples of Europe? Is this a Catholic thing? Is this speaking of the various nations that are Muslim today? There's a lot of those. So it could fit either way, whichever way you want to describe it. So this is the kingdom of the Antichrist, the first 3.5 years, okay? 10 kings, 3 will die, the religion of the whore of Babylon. But this is where the big twist happens, okay? Like if this was a movie, here we are getting into the third act and the huge twist. I am your father. He was dead the whole time. Okay. It's like if Revelation was directed by M. Night Shyamalan, this is the big moment where we gasp, something big happens. Because this has all been kind of going along. We're putting the pieces together. But wait a second. It's kind of intriguing here. You got this Antichrist guy. He's using religion as a way to consolidate his power to himself. There's this religion that's intoxicated the world. And the woman's just riding this wave of her popularity. All those Christians were raptured out. They're out of the way. Antichrist is in charge. And she gets again, maybe she thinks she's riding the beast. She's controlling the Antichrist. But wait a second. Does that sound like the Antichrist we've always read about? Does the dragon get controlled by this woman? Or does the dragon want to control the Antichrist? Does the Antichrist want to do what the woman says? Or does the Antichrist want to be the top dog? Does he want a woman riding him, or does he want to be the one on top? And so the Antichrist will reject the whore's influence and demand that he himself be worshiped as God. He is not interested in sharing his glory with Semiramis, the queen of heaven, the whore of Babylon. He wants all the worship to himself. Verse 16, and the 10 horns that you saw, they and the beast will hate the prostitute. They will make her desolate and naked and devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. That's what's happening to this Babylonian system. They will devour her flesh and burn her up with fire. Verse 17, for God has put it into their hearts to carry out his purpose by being of one mind and handing over their royal power to the beast until the words of God are fulfilled. Verse 18, and the woman that you saw is the great city that has dominion over the kings of the earth. This is the big turning point in Revelation. In the second half of the tribulation, that's when this eighth kingdom that we looked at takes control, okay? The Antichrist will decide, I'm done with this Semiramis. I'm done with this Mary stuff, okay? I don't want the worship going to her. I want 100% of it going to me. And so what is he going to do? He is going to march into the Jewish temple, and he will desecrate it by proclaiming himself to be God right there in God's temple in Jerusalem. 2 Thessalonians, it talks about this in various places, the abomination of desolation. I'll show you here in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. Paul writes, let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will not come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. Verse 4, who opposes and exalts himself against every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. And so that is how all this plays out. Now I've covered the entire chapter of Revelation 17. This was a big study today, guys, and that's where we're going to end it for today. So let me see if we have any comments I need to reply to here. I appreciate everyone who's tuned in tonight. Okay, I don't know why there's a flat earther debate breaking out on here, but appreciate all of you who've tuned in. I know there is some anticipation for this live stream tonight, and I'm sorry I had to delay it a few times. I got a few closing comments to get to in just a second. But next time on this podcast, which will not be this weekend, but I'm hoping the following weekend, we will finally get into the final night vision of Zechariah. It's not the end of Zechariah's book. He's got some more oracles and stuff like that that will come. A lot of stuff about Jesus, his first and second comings that we're going to look at. And so we got a lot of great things ahead in our exploration of Zechariah. This was just kind of a little side quest that we took into Revelation, looking at what I think is the most complicated chapter of the entire book. So I hope I brought some illumination to it. I got a few more comments to get to in just a second. But again, my email, if you want to get in touch with me, it's GodAndHisProphetsPodcast@gmail.com. And so I know I was hard on the Catholic stuff today. Guys, I am not mad at Catholics today. Again, I got friends who are Catholics. I disagree with their religious practice, but they're not violent, okay? They're not like the Catholics of the past. They're not creating Christian martyrs. I get all that, all right? And when I get mad, I'm not mad at Catholics today. I'm mad at progressive Christianity today. That is the thing that actually makes my blood boil more than anything. Guys like that James Tallarico, who just came out of nowhere 6 weeks ago, and here he is trying to say that using the Bible to promote abortion and transgenderism and all kinds of sick stuff. When I get mad today, I get mad at stuff like that, and we could say that's more in the Protestant camp. What I look at as what I talk about this Catholic stuff today is I'm looking at Scripture, and I'm just trying to make sense of what the past 2,000 years of history have shown us, and also going back to the Tower of Babel and all the cult-like religious junk that came out of Babel and has infiltrated the rest of the world. I'm trying to make sense of all these things. And where I come down, no surprise, I still come down, I lean towards a Catholic Antichrist system in that first 3.5 years of the tribulation. I just think that we're set up very well to see all that take place. I could be wrong. A lot of this stuff, like I said before, we'll get there when we get there, okay? We'll understand it once it happens. A lot of stuff is mysterious between now and then, but I lean towards, I think it's more of a Catholic Antichrist system, not an Islamic one. But I do have a couple more comments to make on this from the John Corson commentary on where he talks about Revelation. I just love how he puts it here on page 1763 in his book. He said, this chapter, talking about Revelation 17, this chapter has dealt with all of so-called Christendom being united by the power and potency of Rome. But one must not equate Rome with Catholicism. There are wonderful... I've been talking too long. I can't get through this sentence. There are wonderful brothers and sisters in the Catholic Church, just as there are wonderful brothers and sisters in the Baptist, Lutheran, Episcopalian, Methodist, and Orthodox Church. But after these brothers and sisters are raptured, the remaining power and prestige of the church in Rome will be manipulated by the Antichrist. And although the Roman Church will think she's in control, she'll inevitably suffer the same fate as that of her own Pope Pius. Here's a little story. In 1804, Napoleon summoned Pope Pius VII to leave Rome and to come to Paris in order to crown him Emperor of France. Knowing the one who crowns the emperor will always have a voice of power with the emperor, Pius showed up with crown in hand. But just as he was about to place the crown on Napoleon's brow, Napoleon grabbed it from Pope Pius and crowned himself. Horrified, Pius immediately understood the implication. Napoleon had wrested all power from Rome, and the day is coming when Antichrist will do the same. So, like I said before, okay, yeah, Catholics today are not violent. You don't turn on the news and see Catholics killing people. You do turn on the news and see a lot of Muslims killing people, all right? There was like a bomb thrown into a crowd by a couple of Muslim boys just yesterday in the news, or maybe it was Sunday in the news. So if you just look at the news and the headlines, it looks like we're set up for an Islamic Antichrist. If I just look at the Bible and look at history, that seems to line up better with the Catholic influence, okay? But, again, I'm not hating on Catholics today. Once all the Christians are out of the world, once everyone who's a true believer in Christ has been raptured out, all bets are off. Anything goes. And so who knows what that religion of the final end times will be. A couple more interesting things I found. The European Union, when they were forming decades ago, they created this poster. And I just thought this was so interesting. They created this poster. I'm going to put it up on the screen here. For those listening, I'll try to describe it. But the poster for when the EU decided to create itself, okay, this conglomeration of a bunch of different European nations, and they're like, we all want to use the same currency and all come together. The picture that they used was a picture of the Tower of Babel, a picture of the Tower of Babel being constructed. What a strange visual that you want to put out there, as this is what's supposed to represent us. We're coming together, guys. We're all banding together. And they use this picture of the Tower of Babel, and it even says in the bottom of the poster, Europe, many tongues, one voice. And the people, this came out decades ago, this poster. But the people in the poster, they look like Minecraft characters. They're all blocky looking because they're meant to look like bricks. Babel is associated with the bricks. You know, that's a famous part of the story of the Tower of Babel. And so it's about how like all these people connect together to build this tower. And it's kind of like, guys, what happened to the last Tower of Babel? Like, why do you want to use that as your visual for what you're trying to build with the European Union? I just, that's very interesting. That's just very interesting that is the picture they wanted to go with. And by the way, that's the actual Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. It wasn't this circular structure, but the circular picture of like the Tower of Babel being this rounded tower, like an ancient castle, that's the predominant visual in a lot of people's heads when we think about Babel. So that's why they went with that picture. It doesn't even look like the real Babel. Something else interesting is the 2-pence coin that's used in the European Union. It is a picture of a woman riding a beast, okay? The picture of a woman riding an ox. Now, what is this picture from? This goes back, again, to ancient mythology, where the goddess Europa, which is where Europe gets its name from, the goddess Europa was said to have met Zeus by Zeus turned himself into a bull. There's a whole lot more we could go into with all that. You can look on my YouTube channel, search up Zeus. Zeus is a name for Satan. Satan, you can search up what Satan looks like. I did an episode or two about that. Satan looks like a cow. He has the face of a cherub because he's a cherubim. And the cherub's face is the face of an ox or a bull. It's a bovine face. So in ancient mythology, Zeus made himself form in the form of a bull, and Europa thought this was just such a sexy bull. She just decided to hop on it and take it for a ride, and he went galloping off into the sea and gave her like a ride across the sea, okay? And then when they emerged, then he revealed that I'm actually Zeus. And she's like, oh, I've been riding Zeus. Well, isn't that interesting? That then you get to Revelation 17, and there is a woman riding a beast who emerges from the sea. Isn't that interesting how this ancient mythology kind of lines up with biblical prophecy? And then, isn't it interesting that the European Union comes up with the 2 pence or 2 euro? I'm sorry, I'm not from Europe, so I can't remember what the exact monetary value of this coin is. But it's the coin has a picture of a woman riding the beast. And I'm just like, wow. I just think it's all kind of obvious what the Babylonian system, how it's going to manifest in the end times. But again, we'll just see how it all plays out, okay? I talk a lot right here about how Europe, and then that implies more of a Catholic Antichrist. But then actually, if you look at the demographics of Europe right now, they are becoming pretty well dominated by Muslims. In fact, just a couple nights ago, right before bed, I was reading this book. It's called The Shinar Directive. And it's a book. I'm doing a lot of research on Tower of Babel stuff right now. Babylon and Tower of Babel. And there was a quote. Let me see. Page 120. Let me go back and find that. There's this quote that I just thought, this is really interesting. This book came out. Let me see what year this came out. It's by Michael Lake. Doesn't live very far from me, actually. This book came out in 2014, but here's what he said. In the next few years, we could see the fusion of the Roman Catholic Church and Islam. The mythology of Europa may play out before our very eyes. The crescent moon-horned bull of Islam will either seduce or rape Europa, formerly under Catholic control, to give birth to something new. The revised Roman Empire with a horrific version of Islam Christianity, with the Pope, who is the regent of Christ according to Catholic doctrine, serving as a false prophet and new herald of Islam, who will perform miracles like those found in the Gospels. He will team with the Islamic Messiah, the Mahdi, to bring the entire world under the banner of Islam, and those who refuse will be beheaded. Okay? Like I said, after the rapture, all bets are off. All these things could merge into one. I'm holding all these views today with an open hand, with an open mind. And as I said before, we'll see what was symbolic in Bible prophecy and what was literal. I do believe Babylon, it's going to have something to do with the end times plans. Okay? Now, is it going to be literal Babylon? As in, is it going to be the city that Saddam Hussein was literally restoring, started back in like the 70s or 80s, and it still exists today? People live there today. Is that actually going to be the city of the literal Antichrist someday? Or is it all just symbolic? We'll have to wait and see. I do hope, though, after this very long episode this week, I hope the Bible makes more sense to you after this, and I hope that you see more clearly the story of God and his prophets.